being here and for joining this interview. We want to explore your origin, your creative process, how
Sure.
you make your choices in business, and what the future for comic world how will be. So you were born in Seoul
Yeah.
and raised in the U.S. Which early memory from Korea or your family still appear in your art?
Well, I don't know if it necessarily appears my art, but I remember watching Superman, the cartoon in Korea, 1968, I think, probably 69, was the Max Fleischer directed Superman cartoons. And so that was my connection between my homeland, where I was born, and when we immigrated to the United States. uh, there was Superman in the United States as well. So it was a nice bridge between the two cultures that were very different at the time. And I think that played a big role in my love and obsession with DC Comics. And so I think that's the connectivity there.
So nice. So in which moment of this period comics become a motivation for you? Was there someone who inspired you to start?
No, it was the passion and obsession I had with comics was very self-driven. My parents did not encourage it. In fact, they saw reading comics as a waste of time. I think they allowed me to do it because it kept me quiet. They would buy me a comic book and I would just read it over and over and draw for hours. And so they got a lot of value out of buying a 25 cent or 20-cent comic book. But it was something that I just loved. And the great thing about comic books, as you know, is that you can tell what's going on in the story, even if you can't read the dialogue. If the artist does their job correctly, you can understand the story just by looking at the pictures. But I was very curious, like, what are they saying? What is the white, balloons? What's in the yellow caption boxes? And so it was a great incentive and motivating force for me to learn English because when we moved to the United States, I spoke zero English, and when you're 5 years old, you have a special ability to learn languages quickly. So I'm sure I learned English within months, and wanting to read comic books was a big motivating force for me to learn how to read and write English.
So you was there. Your first connection with comics was there in U.S. Where did you move in the first years in U.S.? Where was you living?
Yeah. So we moved to the Midwest, so the central part of America, Ohio, and then later Missouri. So the Midwest grew up mostly, you know, uh, in Midwestern cities. It's a slower pace of life than living in New York City or Los Angeles. But also, there weren't very many other Asians. The Asian community, the Korean community in St. Louis, where I grew up, mostly like from fourth grade on. There's like five or six different Korean churches that were kind of in a loosely bound community. But in my school, I was the only Korean kid in my grade. It was a very small school, but in general, there weren't a lot of other Koreans in the Midwest
So was like
Compared to like New York or Los Angeles,
yeah.
where you have very thriving immigrant communities.
Yeah, but so the first years you was in a little town in Ohio.
It was Warren, Ohio, and then Youngstown, Ohio. Warren is smaller, but Youngstown is a larger industrial city. But it's the Iron Belt. It's sort of the cities were in decay, right? They had seen their heyday during the steel industry, and St. Louis, Missouri, is where I grew up mostly as a preteen and teenager, and yeah, it's called the Gateway to the West.
So so cool. So in this moment, your first connection with comics, what was the popular? I mean, Superman was the most popular in that moment.
At that time, it was probably for me Batman, right? Because the TV show Batman 1966 had just finished airing by the time we moved there in '69, but it was in repeat, and so you know this is the age of dinosaurs. There's no, streaming services. There's no video cassettes. You could only see this content if you were at the right place at the
At
right
the
time
right
in
moment. Yeah,
entertainment. And you had to
yeah.
like look at the TV guide to figure out when shows were coming. There's only one show, Batman, and there was a black and white TV show, George Reeves, um, Superman TV show, which I watched over and over. So those were my two primary, introductions to live action superhero shows. There was a lot of animated Marvel cartoons, but they didn't air in St. Louis. But sometimes if we'd visit friends in Michigan or Pennsylvania, you look through their TV guide and you would see it, and it's like, all right, 3:30, I got to be in front of the TV to see this. So it was, it was hard work to be a fan. It was really hard work to be a fan back then.
Yeah, because you need to do homework. I mean, you
Yeah,
need
you
to
had to set your
start to
time, and
study.
if you're yeah,
Yeah.
and if you're a kid, you don't have a phone, you don't have alarms, you don't have internal alarms, you don't have like digital reminders. You had to keep it all in your head and make sure that you were in front of the TV at the right time.
So it's so interesting because in that moment is when Adam West was playing Batman.
That's right. Yeah,
That's right. And in also in this year, in few episode was also Bruce Lee, no, as Green
the
Arrow.
Green Hornet. Yeah, so I watched
Yeah, the Green
Green
Hornet.
Hornet was another show. I watched everything, anything that felt remotely superhero. There was a TV show called The
Oh,
Avengers, but it was about some British spies. I watched Land of the Giants, Lost in Space, Star Trek, of course. Um, there's movies about giant insects that would attack America, like grasshoppers and ants. I watched those
yeah.
Sunday morning. They always had those movies on, the black and white movies. So anything that was genre, fantasy, science fiction, superhero, like I consumed it. Like that was my what I loved.
Yeah, I think you was so lucky because growing up at the end of the 60s in US was so cool because the music and the pop culture was growing up so in so different ways. So I
Sure.
don't know, yeah. So I don't know if some of your partners of comic artists have the same situation. I mean, people of that time.
Well, anyone near my age probably had a very similar, back then there was only three, maybe four TV stations, right? ABC, CBS, NBC, and PBS. So, you know, everyone watched the same shows. Everyone kind of grew
Yeah.
up with the same pop culture references, music, film, television. And because there was no social media, people went to see movies, people watched TV every night. So there was more of a uniformity in sort of nerd culture. And back then it was a secret culture, right? Um, you didn't really tell people you were into this nerdy stuff because they might beat you up. So a little bit of a secret passion for many years until I was like a young adult, until I was like 22 or 23. I did not share this with many people beyond my very close circle of friends who were also nerds that collected and read comic books.
So yeah, because in that moment I thought because as a European in Europe in that time, I mean I didn't was born, but as I know, there was no so many TV shows. So it's interesting to see how American people and North American people growing up in that times because television was so different in Europe. Here was more about news and not so many cartoons. Maybe Mazinger Z, I know, this Japanese robot. I don't know how it's in English. Mazinger, no?
Monsignor.
Uh, it's like
Giant.
Ultraman.
Yeah, Ultraman. I watched Ultraman, and then Johnny
Yeah,
Sacco and his flying robot or
yeah,
giant.
yeah,
Yeah, I watched those shows. But for European, I remember in like the late '80s, or not late, early '80s, '81, '82, Heavy Metal magazine So obviously the work of
Yeah.
Mobius, Liberatore, um, Jimenez. There was a lot of really mind blowing uh, science fiction, fantasy art that was being created in Europe that you know I was discovering for the first time, and that was the truth back then. Is and that's what's so different now. Today, you can see anything and everything that is being created. I think there's very few things that you are not that you can't find if you really look. Back then, it was hard to find anything. You had to wait till someone imported it and translated it, and even then, they would only bring a little bit over at a time. So it was it, exposure was very controlled, and I think and being a fan was a very different experience than it is now.
So maybe in that moment, because as you say, it was like a secret community about because we like this kind of stuff. It was able to create this kind of superheroes. Maybe because today we have this huge opportunity to the information is not the same.
Yeah.
Maybe before, because people didn't know so much about these things, it becomes something so mysterious, and maybe because in that moment it was so unique and special to open a comic and read every story.
Yes. I think when you have fewer choices, you value each choice more, right? If you are starved of food, when you finally have a meal, it's going to taste the best that it ever could. When you have a buffet of endless amounts of food, you eat something, that's meh, it's okay,
Yeah.
and you move on to the next thing. And I feel like that's kind of where we're at with pop culture. People put their heart and souls into telling stories, whether it's a comic book or a big feature film, and people just consume it and move on to the next thing because there's so much, and it's in some ways it's almost too much, in my opinion, right? So back then there was more scarcity, but man, you loved everything that you got, and you were appreciative of it because you don't know when the next thing would come out or when you might have an opportunity to see yet another cool science fiction, TV show or cool comic book.
Yeah, it was more shocking moments. So
Yes.
in these years, there was a movie, film, or book that you read or you saw that changed your way of your drawing. How to draw?
No, I don't think the style I draw in is pretty largely influenced by my own evolution as an artist, what I'm trying to achieve with the storytelling or the style. Um, you know, Watching other stories or films, I think it serves to motivate me or excite me about certain genres. If you see a cool science fiction movie, you want to, play in that space. But largely, my interest in creating stories is self propelled. Comes from my lifelong love of genre and telling cool stories about the future or the world just beyond our understanding. I think it's always an interesting creative space to explore.
So cool. I follow you in on social media,
Yeah.
and I noticed that you are a very family guy. Like you enjoy your family a lot. I become a father 3 months ago,
Oh, congratulations.
and
Great.
yeah, thank you so much. It's so amazing.
Yeah.
My first time. So I wanted to ask you if your parenthood changed the way to tell stories.
Uh, Not necessarily. I think, certainly every parent wants their children to be proud of them and the work they do. It's interesting to me now. I've got 9 children, so you have to catch up a little bit. But they're 11 years old to 33, and so most of them are adults, and so I think they understand what it is that I do, and I want to make them proud, of course, and but they're not necessarily into superheroes. They love anime, they love cosplay, they love Harry Potter. So it's always
Mm.
interesting to me, generationally. Uh, there's always a generation gap, and I feel like sometimes in our families it's expressed through what we really like, the fandoms that we like, right? So I like Star Trek, I like Star Wars. My older kids are more into anime and um, you know other similar kind of content. But at the end of the day, we all love storytelling, and we share our passions and interests, and so I've discovered a lot through them. And certainly games, video games, have become a
Yeah.
big part of their sort of worldview and what they hold most important. And it's always interesting to me to see how the games they loved as kids are now a big part of like their belief systems and what they hold valuable today. Like World of Warcraft is a game that we used to all play together when the kids were younger, and they have such fond memories of these adventures we took, even though these adventures are all virtual, right? They're all quests,
So
crusades,
cool. Yeah.
raids that happen on in a fictional virtual space, but they feel as real to them as if we went on a vacation to Hawaii, right? So
Yeah, it's so cool because not every father spend time with the kids enjoying playing a video game like World of Warcraft or some adventure, and this create for me this create a huge treasure memories for the kids.
sure,
So be able to share this moment with them, I believe is so important for them, and you create a unique link with them.
sure,
So
yeah.
yeah, I wanted to ask you if any of your kids become part of any story that you created for in your comics.
Uh, no, not necessarily. I think once you sort of cross that bridge, you got to do it for all of them. You can't just pick one kid or two kids to be part of
Yeah,
a
yeah,
story. And I think it's also, you want to be a little careful because if you create a story around your kids and one of them turns out to betray the others, or has a secret
yeah,
manifesto, I would hate for them to think like that's what I really felt, right? Like when you start crossing, real life with fictional storytelling, I think you just want to be a little careful. Uh, but certainly inspired by makes sense. You draw a lot of sidekicks and young people in at DC, like Robins, and there are a lot of Young Justice, Teen Titans, um, and seeing kind of kids and their development, physical and mental, intellectual, uh, does play into kind of how I draw them on the page and what I know kids are capable of. It always kind of blows my mind when you think about like Robin. If he's 11 or 12 years old, I have an 11-year-old son. Could he swing from a rope off a building? Like I start thinking about these things and going like, you know, um, and so it's good reference points, but at the end of the day, we're in the world of fantasy and telling stories that defy the laws and conventional thinking of reality, and that's the fun of it, right? Like draw inspiration from real life, but what we do is beyond real life, and you have to always remind yourself of that.
yeah. So cool. You say that the some of them of your kids like manga or anime. Do you like any art from manga or anime? Did you read?
Sure. Yeah, but I didn't discover it till very late. Even obviously I take it back. When I was younger, I watched Ultraman, Johnny Sokko and his flying robot, Godzilla, uh, Gamera, the flying turtle. So I was exposed to that. But in terms of manga itself, it wasn't until like the 80s, the early 80s, when Marvel started importing Akira and they
Yeah,
translated it. And I was like, wow, this manga art is fantastic, Otomo's work. And then I started, and again, you couldn't just find it anywhere. You couldn't go to the grocery store or even some comic book stores might not carry it. Sometimes you have to find specialty stores that carry just imported Japanese books. But when they finally brought Akira, it started hitting most American comic book stores. But I would find other things like Appleseed by Shiro Matsumue, and
Matsumune.
yeah, and that stuff wasn't translated, but I still bought it because I just wanted to look at the images, right? And gunsmith cats and just anything and everything. But I didn't understand it because I didn't read it. I just liked the imagery. And now we live in a world, post Tokyo Pop, Viz graphics. I mean, you can find all this stuff. And through my kids, I discovered Death Note, One Piece, One Punch Man, you know, uh, My Hero Academia, so many different series.
Yeah.
Uh, and like I said, we live in a golden era where anything and everything that's being produced is at your fingertips.
Yeah, it's so cool because I mean I saw that manga and anime grow up in so many ways in the last 20 years, and at the same time I was reading DC and Marvel from the golden era 70s, 80s, 90s, and I saw so different path ways.
Yeah.
I don't know what is this. I mean, of course, Japanese artists are different mentality, philosophy about how should be a manga. So, what do you think is the different? Why they is because American culture and Japanese culture, or there is something else?
Why manga and American comics are so different? I think the notion of superheroes, a single person that gets power that decides to go out and change the world, whether he's a hero or a villain, it has some deep sort of American roots. It reminds me of like the cowboy, right? It's someone that goes
Yeah,
out
it's true. Yeah,
into danger, the wilderness, and forges his or own her own path. Justice is dispensed through power. So vigilantism, the one sort of loner, figure of justice, feel very American to me. Certainly, Japanese culture is not reflective of that. I think Europeans, uh, when you look at their comics, it was more science fiction or Western. So this very notion of dressing up in like pajamas and flying and saving people,
yeah,
from danger, probably felt a little comedic or childish. I think uh, to people outside of America. So I think that in a weird way, the art forms were there in all the continents, but they didn't connect, and so they all kind of evolved independently of each other based on their local traditions and folklore and mythology, tastes of the creators, tastes of the audiences. And now we have, through the power of the internet and more globalism, you have more cross referencing, commingling. But there's still, I think, regional sort of differences or uh, variations, I think. But it was different back then for sure.
yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm reading lately manga and comics, and I noticed how the snowball is growing up. I thought that people was going to stay without ideas or for creating new characters, but looks like it's becoming bigger and bigger. Like One Piece, for example, is so huge and funny and so different from all that people did before. So I think that communication and social media and internet is creating everything, so many
Mm.
things, and in the same time there are more creation that I think maybe never in the history. I don't know if I'm wrong about this.
Mhm.
And I wanted to ask you about your X-Men run become
Sure.
so iconic. How
Mhm.
do you remember that time working there in the House of Ideas, the pressure, the deadlines, that energy?
Yeah, it was a long time ago, but you know, even though I worked at Marvel, I was working at home. So I was in California, I was in an art studio I shared with Will Spertasio and my inker Scott Williams, and those early years. When I say early years, I spent 6 years at Marvel. So the entire time I was there, it was like you were living out your dream, right? This was my mission: to get into comics, to work at Marvel, to work on my favorite characters as a kid, which were the X-Men. I finally achieved that, and so I think it was just it was all consuming. It was a passion of mine. Every day I drew every single day. I worked on the comics every single day. Christmas, my birthday, whatever. Um, and at the same time, I was learning how to draw, become a better artist. So not only get to live my dream, but also get paid to become a better artist. And I was just cranking out. I was producing a lot of work for both the X-Men, but short stories and covers for the Nom, Transformers, whatever they asked me to do, I did it because this was, like you were a starving prisoner, finally freed. You're in front of the buffet of you're going to eat everything. And so those are really exciting times. Staying up all night, working all night, days
All
on
night.
end.
I mean, you at home, but or at the office.
Well, I had we rented out an apartment space that we worked, but staying up 24 hours was a very regular
Really?
experience. Yeah. So usually I would have like I would probably draw the book in 3 weeks, and that last week you're drawing all the time, like sleeping very little, and then you're exhausted after finishing the book. I would take almost a week, like 5 or 6 days off, and then start again slowly, and then speed up and do a lot at the end. And when you're young, you can do that because you would think, wouldn't it be smarter just to work a little bit every day and pace yourself, and so you don't, have these all nighters. But I've just never been able to work that way. My brain isn't wired. My brain is very wired, like for deadlines, and I have a different speed I can tap into when I get closer to a deadline. It's hard for me to do that at the beginning. So it's just the way it's always been. But I just remember that period of time as being constantly working, loving working. And it was a super exciting time because the days of from when I was a fan to working as a professional were really just kind of intermixed. They were one and the same, and getting to live out that dream was something you can never re-experience because once you get older you're no longer just a pure fan. You have you know it's a different kind of mentality and approach to the work.
So cool. I mean, how is to be walking on the street and for first time you notice that you can buy comics at the store with your name on it.
Yeah, I thought it would be more impactful. I remember when the first book came out, I went to the store. I, it was cool, but it wasn't like a as cool of a moment as I thought it would be. I think partly because what I saw printed was different than what I saw in my head. Because
Okay, okay.
when I first started at Marvel, I didn't see the ink pages, or they would send me the black and white ink pages. So I saw the ink pages, but I didn't see the colored pages. They didn't send me the colors. So the first time I saw the book colored and lettered was on the newsstand. It was always different from how I imagined it. There was one cover of Alpha Flight. I think it was the second or third cover I did where the characters are busting through a wall and the colors made the background all pink. And in my head, I was like, I never saw it as pink. And so it was not a disappointment, but it was a shock. Right. And so that's what it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I can't believe here's my work. It was always like, whoa, that's my work. Oh, wow, that's so different from what I imagined. Right. So it was more shock and surprise for a long time until I started seeing, you know, eventually it starts sending me the colors before and I could see kind of the work itself. But it was less about um, the pride in having something done. I took more enjoyment out of doing the work and getting to live through these fictional characters by drawing them more than seeing it published and printed. Um, so the joy
Because
was the creative process, not the
mhm.
creative product.
because there was no communication between you and the colorist.
Not early days, not early days.
Not early.
Later, as I became a bigger name in the industry, I could ask for more access to things, or they wanted to share more of it with me because they felt I added value if I saw things like that and could give feedback. Made more of a difference. Yes.
So cool. Uh, you told me that there was crazy days and weeks that you was working 24 hours. There was a special moment. Do you remember any special moment that the time like stopped when you was creating one? There was one page that you was drawing and you say to yourself, this moment is one of the best work I think I ever did. Like you feel
No.
like a special.
No, I mean, I think there. You probably feel that about. You have that feeling after every figure you draw. Once you draw something and you don't erase it anymore, that means you've in your head said, okay, that's cool. That looks good to me. And then you move on to the next figure. So you have that sort of dopamine, drop after each successful drawing that you do. I don't, it's, there's not anything where I go like, oh, this was the best thing I drew. I don't know. I don't, it's more, you have an internal mechanism where you create anything. How do you know when it's done? How do you know when to stop and put the pencil down? And so obviously there's something in your brain that says, okay, that looks good. Move on to the next thing. So if you think about it that way, everything I've drawn on the page passed that test at some point. So I'm happy, proud, whatever the word is for everything I've drawn, because if I finished it, that means I thought it was good, like, right? Um, and so I feel like everything kind of falls under that banner because it went through that process and was finally approved. And now the fans may, and I realize what the fans like and what I like are very different, right? So sometimes I look at something and go like, I like that because I did 3-point perspective properly for the first time, or I like that because I drew a down shot of a figure, or I drew a very complicated upshot for the first time and got the lighting and structure correct. So they're little artistic milestones and achievements that I remember, but the fans don't care. Like they don't go like, "Oh, that's the first time you did that right." They just go like, "That looks cool. That doesn't look cool." Right? And so we're on different wavelengths, and we're looking at the work in slightly different ways. Because as a fan, you're looking at it as a piece of a story, and does it bring you into the world? Do you feel like it's happening? Do you feel the emotion? Do you feel the power, the dynamicism? And as an artist, you're thinking like, does this make sense? Did I set up this sequence correctly? Is the lighting proper? Is the is the anatomy correct? All these things, right? There's two different considerations, and so um, I'm not a reliable judge on what is cool or not cool because I'm looking at it slightly differently than the fan or reader.
Yeah, you receive in different way, but
Yes.
you usually have one of your favorite frames or pages. Do you have in your house, or because I saw that you have some collectibles there, but
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't have
Yeah.
so
There's
cool.
no. No. There's a an X-Men cover, but someone redrew it. It's not my work. They just redrew and
Okay,
gifted it
okay.
to me. Yeah. This art is there. These are newspaper dailies strips by
Yes,
Al Williamson
I will listen.
from. Yeah, he gifted them to me years ago. Um, I don't have my work hanging on the walls.
But all this stuff is your collection, is your
It's
own
just a bunch
collection.
of junk. Yeah, yeah.
Because
It's just
I saw.
toy
Yeah,
stuff.
I saw you in some picture with huge statues of any of your designs, like Prime One Studio. I think I saw you in Tokyo with this
Yes.
huge Batman,
Oh yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah, that
you
was
don't,
when I visited their studios in Japan. Yes, and
and
they've gifted me statues, and I've done unboxings and stuff like that. And I have some of those out there, but I don't have. um, a lot of my artwork on the walls. It feels a little obvious. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm tired
Yeah,
about, so I don't
yeah,
want to see again. Yeah, of course.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's obviously. I wanted to ask you, when you and your team was founded, Image
yeah.
and Wildstorm, what did you want to change in the industry? Did you want to bring something new?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of considerations. One, we wanted more control over the creative process, right? That meant better coloring, better paper, more input in how books are created, marketed, publicized. We felt that I think the approach that Marvel and DC had at the time was character first. The creators were important, but not as important. I think we changed that whole dynamic, that formula. The creators are as important in my mind as the characters, and the storylines are just as important too. So there's a changing of perspective. And I think in terms of financial considerations, we I think changed the way artists were being compensated for the better, and we created more opportunities for people to own their own creations and control their own little cottage businesses. I think even though I'm no longer part of Image, I'm still very proud of what we created and the fact that they're still super successful and are it's a great platform for a lot of new ideas, new creators to find audiences and tell new stories.
Yeah, it's so important that when artists and companies create like a symbol, like you saw you see a picture, a drawing, and you say, "Oh, this is Jim Lee, or this is Frank Miller, or this is Vermejo." So when you draw, for example, Batman, what are your not negotiable? What must stay in the draw?
Yeah, I probably had when you're younger and you're a fan, you tend to have very strong opinions. I've noticed reading things online. And I think when you transition and work in the industry and become a professional for a while, at least for me, I'm more open to other points of view. So I think when I started Batman, to me it had to be the Frank Miller Batman, shorter ears, bigger, blockier, figure, like wrinkly costume, and he was inspired by Wayne Dick Sprang, I think, and sort of the Silver Age of Batman. Uh, but then by the time I finished Hush, he was a leaner body, and now even with Hush 2, he's got longer ears. I think for me, it's variety. It's like I did a version of Batman. The Mutables at the time were the ones I really liked, but I don't want to just keep repeating that, especially 20 years after I did the first one. Um, and so, like, what can I do different? Well, we can use the yellow and black chest symbol. We can do longer ears. I could do different gauntlets. So I think it's important as an artist to keep yourself, interested in the work, challenged by the work. And that means maybe thinking about your work and your style, the immutables that you think once held to be unchangeable and firm, like to re-examine and deconstruct and perhaps think of it in new ways. I think that's part of the artistic process. And so I'm much more open to change and um, variation than I was early days. Early days, I was like, no, it's got to be this costume. It's got to be this. And, because that's how I felt as a fan. And then later, as you start seeing that all these things can be true and appealing at the same time. You don't have to lock yourself into one approach. So I have a much more open-minded approach to the characters, the designs, the storytelling.
Yeah, because when you become a creator and you feel the character inside yourself, like Frank Miller say that Batman is always 29, and I'm older than Batman.
Right.
So this was his inspiration to make a different Batman.
Sure, sure.
Um, what was your inspiration to create a more slightly faster Batman?
I think it was, again, just so I'm not repeating myself visually, right? So I feel like the Batman I drew in Hush 1 is different than Hush 2, and even All Star Batman and Robin, a different take, you know. Uh, because I think you just don't want to draw the same thing over and over for decade after decade. You want to challenge yourself and understand that, um, maybe pushing yourself to do something that you don't feel as comfortable doing is is good thing for you in the long run, artistically, creatively, right? Um, there was also, I think, drawing a different physique on Batman. It's just it frees yourself up, right? You just don't want to be bound by convention. And at the end of the day, I love Frank Miller's Batman, but I also love Neil Adams' Batman. I love Dick Sprang's Batman. I love Marshall Rogers' Batman. I love David Mazzucchelli's Batman. And so it's nice to kind of pull all the things you like, positive things from each of these, and blend them together to create a new recipe, right? So, um, yeah.
That's so cool. I mean, do you have any design of Batman that or any other character that you regret, or one that you are especially proud?
No, proud's not the word. Sometimes I'm surprised. I'm surprised by the longevity of some of the work I've done. When I did, like when I worked on the X-Men in the '80s, I didn't think like 30 years from now people will still be using these designs and cartoons and have very fond memories of it, and though it would be a different multi-generational groups of fans that grew up on it. I really lived in the moment and thought like, okay, I'm creating this content. These people are reading it. These people like it. Cool. I'll move on to the next thing, and
Yeah,
just kind of repeat. And I didn't think
yeah.
about the cumulative effect of having, a 30 plus year career and realizing, oh my gosh, there are people like yourself who weren't even born when I was doing this that are discovering it now and love it. And so it's that piece of it was unexpected to me, that some of this work would still resonate 30 years later, which is stupid because all the evidence was already there for me, even in the '80s. Like I was a big fan of the Jack Kirby stuff, and that was from the '60s. Neil Adams from the '60s. So 20 years after they drew it, I still loved it. So I didn't have the, you know, someone should have told me, hey, you got, what you're doing is important now, and it could be important years from now. Remember that and think about that. But maybe that would have put too much pressure on me because then everything had to be perfect, not just for now, but for the future. And that's too much. That's too much responsibility. Sometimes it's very freeing and liberating to just say, this is comics. If you can't figure it out, you can figure it out the next month, the next issue. Because if you have to do
Hmm.
a work that's going to stand the test of time now, maybe the stage fright, the responsibility, the burden is too much, and it'll slow you down to the point where you can't even create. So maybe it's nice not to think about the future of it all and just be in the moment and say, "This is cool. I love this. I love this story. This is my take on the story, my take on the characters. I don't care if it, you know, um, doesn't stand up well 20 years from, or if it will or not. That's you can't even control that anyway. So what's the point, right? So uh,
Yeah, you
and
just go with the flow.
yeah, yeah,
Just
yeah.
try
And
to
I
do.
think,
So,
and that's the same thing. Going back to your very first question about style, like to me, the style I work in is what works for me now. This is what excites me now. The proportions, the rendering, the lighting, the storytelling, and so I try not to overthink it because I can do that, and because no one else is having these conversations, just myself, right? So you want to be a little careful. You want to be a little careful that that you understand what it is that you're creating. You're creating an entry into another world that doesn't exist, that tells it, interesting, entertaining stories, and it's not always about correct anatomy. It's not always about you know, getting certain details correct. It's about the experience, and are you serving this experience? And I do have to remind myself sometimes of that, because sometimes you make a change thinking like this is not artistically correct, but maybe only you and maybe three of your friends will understand the mistake, and everyone else, they don't even notice it's there, right? So it reminds me, I knew an inker once that as soon as a book came out, they would look at it and just go like, they would just look at the quality of the printing, right? Like, are the line did the lines print correctly or not? And I'm like, only you are looking at that. No one else looks at that comic. They're reading the book. They're experiencing the art as a sum total. They're not just looking at the black and white art and seeing
at
if
the
the lines
point.
printed or, yeah, right. It's such a narrow focus, and you have to remind yourself it's not just about my art. It's about how my art, my pencils work with the inks, with the colors, with Jeff Loeb's script to create a total sort of immersive package. That's what we should be working towards, right? So it changes your perspective and your focus.
So it's so interesting. I mean, when you are creating, you say that you have your own world inside, thinking about the storytelling and try not to become crazy. So when we are talking with character like Batman or Wolverine, you need to put this storytelling about trauma, and about dark moments and depression and a lot of assassins and killers. And
Right.
from where do you got inspiration about this dark betrayal and this novel? How do you get got
Yeah.
inspiration?
It's through other, the chief inspiration for that, because I haven't lived through, I didn't go to a monastery and learn martial arts, and my parents are still very much alive and happy. So, I'm very blessed with that. I've had a pretty happy, positive life. I think that's why we're drawn to stories, is because you get to experience something that is not part of your reality. You get to look over the abyss and into the darkness, but without really falling, right? So um, that's the excitement of these journeys, is taking these adventures that you could not really do in real life, experiencing what it's like to be Batman or Superman. So I draw a lot of inspiration from other comic books and other movies, books that you're reading. I mean, that's the appeal of fiction and nonfiction. In fact, I probably read more nonfiction now because I find more power in the real things that happen to people and how they overcame them. Is very powerful to me. But I think the chief quality you want to capture is eliciting emotion, right? I think the purpose of art is to communicate and create an emotional response. And so the art we create combined with the words must serve that purpose, must serve to elicit a reaction, whether it's excitement, fear, inspiration, right? That's what we're trying to create. And so, and if you don't, then it becomes invisible, it becomes disposable, right? And so, um, that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's deep inspiration how to create, because a lot of people see it, when they read Batman or some dark stories with a lot of twist. You need to put yourself into near the abyss, look and say, oh, what can happen uh, to Batman or to Wolverine, or we need to put this guy on the edge in
Yes.
order to bring the public the best emotions ever.
Yeah.
So
Well, I will say
it's
one
deep.
thing though, because I don't want to make it seem like I only drew inspiration from other media. My favorite, like I said before, my favorite characters were the X-Men, and only more recently, as an older parent, like I understand the younger version of myself and the appeal of the X-Men, because I alienation is something I definitely felt, right? When you are an immigrant in a new culture, you can't
Mm-hmm.
help but feel different. You can't help but feel ostracized and wanting to fit in, but you're never going to fit in because visually you look different from everyone else. And to me, that's the X-Men. The X-Men were heroes that were feared by the people they were trying to protect, right? That was the, children of the atom. They were, like that was their sort of double bind, right? Is that they wanted to protect humanity, but humanity feared them, right? Wanted to,
Yeah.
enslave, not enslave them, but, they wanted to exile them or control them, right? And so um, I think that's definitely a reason why I like the X Men, the appeal of the X Men to me, feeling other than and feeling outside of the mainstream society. And if I channel any of that into the art, you know, it probably was more subversive, or subconscious than anything else. Because, like I said, when I was younger, I was just so excited to be drawing my favorite characters. I don't think I thought about it on that psychological level. But now, being much older, looking back on it, I could definitely see what was happening under
Yeah.
the hood, as we say.
See, I mean, it's so interesting because maybe not everyone noticed, but every X-Men comes from different places, from Russia, from
Yeah,
Africa, from Japan, from. So you don't
right.
notice
Yeah.
that because you are looking at the full picture, the story and the fights, and because you have 14 years old and you don't think about nationalities and you don't know nothing. And when you getting older, you notice that was a story of immigrants, inclusion about life and people feeling themselves like foreigners.
Yes.
It's so
I
cool.
actually, I mean, by the time I was reading the X Men, the new X Men, I was probably 16 or so. So I knew like the fact that they were international really upped. I love the original X Men, but they were all Americans, right? Uh, they were all white. And when the new X Men came out, it just blew my mind. Like, of course, there are mutants everywhere, right? The
Yeah,
fact
of
that
course.
Xavier had to go to all these different places, to Africa, to Germany, and rescue these people that were being feared or revered as gods. Like it it took it to the next level and made it feel even more realistic and like it's possible, right? Because everything being limited to just Americans or even New York City. All the superheroes at Marvel were in New York City. The fact that they broadened it to the world made more sense to me. Like, yeah, anyone can be bitten by a radioactive spider. It doesn't have to be just
Yeah.
be in New York. It could be anywhere. If Spain has spiders, it could be happening there. So it was a big breakthrough moment for me, and that's why I think I like those characters even more.
So cool. I mean, you was talking before about fans and and opinions, and how is the feedback, the critics? What is more hard to receive, the opinion of the editor or the opinion of the critics, of the public, of the fans?
Um, well, look, I, I don't think the relationship between a creator and the editor is a special one because your editor is your mentor, your travel guide, you know, your therapist, your cheerleader, right? If really good editors, I think, kind of do all that. So their criticism is going to be tempered by all those different responsibilities they have. The fans, especially on the internet, have none of that, and in fact can disassociate you as a person from the work because they typically don't know you, and they can go, "This sucks," or "This is amazing," and
Yeah.
it's always funny as a. I remember a creator, Brent Anderson, actually said to me once, early days, very good advice. He said, you know, I just ignore that stuff on, what the fans think, because if you accept both the praise and negativity, meaning if you accept your work is amazing, you got to also accept the fan that says your work is horrible, right? Like you can't just pick one person's opinion and not the other. Like you have to hold both to be true. And so it's better to believe none of it and decide for yourself if it's good or bad. And I thought that was very smart and liberating. Obviously, I will see comments online about whether they like my work or don't like my work, but I've been in the business long enough that uh, I kind of discount it. The empirical data is people do like my work because the work sells, right? And so people are voting with their pocketbooks, with the hard-earned money that they spend on the work I create. But it doesn't make you immune. Everyone's human, so negativity always hurts, and I don't think I'm inhuman in that way. But for the most part, I try to, you know, put it in a separate box and go like, you know what, you can't control what people think about the work. Just are you happy with the work, and are you inspired by creating the work? And finding that inspiration can be challenging, especially if you've been in the industry for a long time and done a lot of different projects. So to me, it's a self-imposed series of challenges and goals that I have both creatively, intellectually, conceptually.
So cool. I mean, you've been talking about working with the editor, and I wanted to ask you which one was the best uh, time that you was feeling that, oh, now we have here like the dream thing. I feel so comfortable with these guys, and
Sure.
everything is like go so nice.
Well, so it's a little different for me now because I have a very weird situation in that I'm drawing the book for an editor and I'm also the editor's boss's boss, right? So that is not a normal situation, and so I recognize that, and we created safeguards to protect everyone in that, so like people can do their respective jobs. But certainly early days, like I said, I think when I first started working on the X-Men, I was the editor was Bob Harris. Uh, Nothing can kind of replace your first, experience, like when you are loving just creating comics, and you had that communication working with your editor, your collaborators, and finally getting to achieve your dream. That's obviously going to have a special place sort of on the mantle shelf, than working with other groups. But in general, I love comics because it's a collaborative medium. It's not about I'm just going to do this, like everyone, in my opinion, has a voice, and it's good to bring everyone together because everyone's voice will have an impact on the final story. And um, why reduce your chance of having great people work and look at your work and give input and help shape it is sort of my approach today. And so everyone brings something different to the equation, but in terms of pure emotionality and excitement, it's really hard to replace that kind of first experience, working on
Yeah,
the
of
book
course.
that you dream to finally do, right? So the dreams I have, the aspirations I have now working on project are I want to work on this character with this writer, tell this story. Hopefully the fans will like it. And I want to push myself artistically and maybe do something I haven't done before. Even if fans don't recognize what I'm doing as being different from what I've done, I have my sort of own internal milestones and things I want to achieve. And that's very different than the things I was trying to achieve when I first got into the business. But different doesn't make it better or worse. It's just different.
Yeah, I saw. I noticed that you grew up. You have a evolution like as an artist. So I wanted to ask you if you can tell me about one hard episode in your career that taught you a lesson. That,
Um, Gosh, I don't know if I learned lessons well. uh, yeah, I don't know if I have anything like that. I'm sure there was I obviously periods of times where you're disappointed. An opportunity may not have happened. But I've been very fortunate that I've been able to kind of do the projects I wanted to do, work with the people. that I want to work with, and that really is kind of my barometer of success these days, because sales will kind of go up and down depending on the character and the storyline. But to me, it's about you know are you having fun? Are you learning something? Are you still enjoying and loving what it is that you chosen to be your livelihood, your profession? And the answer is yes. So, and if I do have a regret, or I feel like I'm saying no, then I need to fix that or change my approach or do something. I'm not one to just sort of let circumstances dictate my future, right?
Yeah, of
Which
course.
is, if there's something that is stopping me from achieving something, I figure out a way to get past it and move on. So I don't have a lot of regrets, and I don't dwell much on the past for that
Yeah.
reason.
I like your philosophy. I mean, I was traveling around Japan last year, 3 months,
Mhm.
and I don't know if because you are from Korea, but I was learning about Buddhism. I was learning about Shintoism. I visit a lot of temples,
Mhm.
and I really love this kind of energy around these people who try to make not very positive, but try to go with the water, like positive, and learn by day in positive, and you can see in their smiles. People, they enjoy life
Sure.
even when they have bad moments. They
Yeah.
always try to live like a lesson. So it's
Yeah.
so positive. It's also part of being an artist, the philosophy.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was a psychology major at university, right? And I marvel at how the mind works, and I always think about like who's really in charge. What is consciousness? Because my mind will wander. Like whenever my mind wanders into areas which are, negative, or where you're creating anxiety or doubt, self doubt. Like why am I thinking these thoughts? It's something that I spend time thinking about, and it just ends up being unhealthy to me and counterproductive. And so, to me, a lot of what I try to do is think forward facing. Again, going back to, I can't create a perfect issue now. I have another chance next month, and using that as an approach to everything in life. I mean, it's not just about storytelling or creating art. It's about everything, and realizing I don't need to be perfect today. I have tomorrow. I mean, at some point you're going to run out of time, but it's a good thing to keep you facing forward and recognizing that life can't be perfect, and um, we should just be thankful that we have the opportunity each and every day to try and achieve our goals, but we don't necessarily have to achieve them, right? Um, don't beat yourself up too much, and recognize that you're always going to have another opportunity to do this. And so it's one of hopefulness. It's one of positivity. Maybe I'm deluding myself, but it's just kind of how I've led my life, um, and I try to push out things that kind of hold me back from embracing this positivity and forward motion.
So cool. I mean, in drawing, still make you feel like. Do you still enjoy like a kid, like drawing every day and make you smile sometimes? I mean,
Absolutely. I think about drawing, comic like my favorite superheroes on the ground. I would draw on the floor of the kitchen while my mom was cooking dinner or something, or we would take summer vacations in our station wagon. And back in the 70s, you didn't have to wear seatbelts. So I would be in the back of the car with one comic book that they bought to keep me quiet. And I would just be reading and drawing pictures while we were driving hours from St. Louis to California. It would take 3 days, 4 days to drive there, and I would just be drawing all the time. And so it brings me back to those times. I also recognize that I'm much older than I was when I started out in the business, and it's interesting that the creative process changes. It's a little slower, right? And so, I think about like how do I keep myself sharp and fresh? Like what can I learn now that I couldn't learn when I was 25, right? So there are uh, obviously changes that happen, but there are new opportunities that didn't exist, and so you have to kind of remind yourself and push yourself to find those opportunities and moments and understanding.
So cool. I wanted to ask you about drawing. That you say,
Yeah,
which villain do you most respect as a professional challenge?
villain,
Yeah, villain.
like respect as a character or drawing,
Yeah,
like
that you when you feel that okay, this is Joker or this is Two Face. I I want to push myself off the limit because I respect this one so much.
oh, hmm. I think the classic. There's something about the most infamous villains, and this applies to the heroes too, right? It's not just villains, and it touches back on an earlier question you had, I think. But um, whether you feel proud of something or not, uh, there's something about drawing characters that are so famous or infamous, and especially if there were other creators, artists that you loved and looked up to, right? Whether it's Frank Miller, Marshall Rogers, Neil Adams on Batman, not just how they drew Batman, but how they drew the Riddler, how they drew Joker, and wanting to add something to the conversation, like to do something different because everyone's doing a slightly different version of each character, but make it just as cool. Like, and I would think even Magneto to me was a clear example on the Marvel side. Like, I loved Jack Kirby's Magneto the first time I saw him in, X-Men 1, but then also when he came back in later issue, he showed up at the doorstep of the house, I think, three-quarter splash page, and then there was a Dave Cockrum splash where Magneto attacks this army base, and then there's the Neil Adams splash page, and then John Byrne's splash page where he reveals himself, while the X-Men are traveling around the world, and I wanted to recapture that kind of energy when I drew Magneto for the first time. So those are the kind of things I tap into. And I don't know if I feel prouder of that moment, but those are the moments where it's like I want to be part of that club of of creators and images. I want to add something interesting to this conversation that's happening, where giants are standing on the shoulders of previous giants and kind of pushing the medium forward. So uh, that's what I think about.
Um, so the last question I wanted to ask you is like, what advice would you give to new generation to keep the young
Sure.
spirit, curiosity, and creative?
Yeah. So my advice is one that most people don't want to hear, in that um, I think a lot of people today, because we have such interconnectivity with everyone else, and have the means to communicate, and have all these resources and tools, whether it's social media, YouTube, clips, and there's so much information out there. I think a lot of times people are looking for, can you share with me the one thing that will help me unlock my creative potential, the one thing that's going to make me a better artist or allow me to have a career in comics. And my answer is really boring, and I think most people go like, anyone could have told me that, but which is like, you have to do the work. Like, I can't, telling you what pencil to buy or what paper to buy, I don't think it's going to make a difference in the long run. What will make a difference is if you sit down and draw comics, and people go like, wait, I need more. And I'm like, no, 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 that's it. You have to do the work. You can be a writer. If you want to be a comic book writer, you can sit down and start writing now. You don't need me to tell you how to do it. You don't need me to give you a job as a publisher. You don't need the fans to go like, that's good and you're a writer. You can say you're a writer or an artist, do the work. And that is so hard for people to do, because people rather have the hack or the shortcut. But the truth is, the only way you get good at being a writer or an artist, and this includes AI, you have to sit down and do the work. That's how you become a better artist, a better sort of creative mind. And it takes, they always say that 10,000 hour rule. You need 10,000 hours of drawing before you're going to get good. There's nothing I can say that will shorten that amount of time or give you a hack to circumvent that. But it's such an obvious and simple answer that I think most people, their ears close, their eyes sort of glaze over. It's just not a sexy answer, I think, but that is the answer. That is the thing I tell people.
Yeah,
But maybe I'll come
just
up with
do.
a better answer.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, at the end of the day, is that do your best, do because you love, and just
Well,
feel
here's
it.
the
You need.
yeah. Well, here's the thing, Sam. You're not going to do your best, and that's another thing people don't understand. Is like they want to draw something and have it be amazing, and everyone go like, "This is so great. Why aren't you drawing? Batman. Your first work is going to suck. I guarantee it, 100,000%. I will bet all my money that it's going to be horrible. You'll think it's great, but it's going to be horrible. But you can't get to great without being horrible. And everyone has traveled along that path. But it takes 10,000 hours to get from horrible to great or good, right? But most people are not going to invest 10,000 hours into it. Because if it were that easy, everyone would be an amazing artist, right? And so you have to have that passion, love for it, and that will propel you and harden your skin for that 10,000 hour journey because it's rough. There's a lot of work that goes into it. But that's true
Yeah.
for everything. It's not just art. It's not just comic book art. Anything. Like there's a reason why I'm not a great musician. I put in 0 hours into to making music.
Yeah, me
I,
too.
I,
It's okay.
I it would be wonderful if I could be a musician. I've tried to play the piano and I go like my heart's not in it. I can't put that kind of commitment. I'm never going to be great at it, right? So, um, therein lies the rub. But if I guarantee you, if you sit down and start drawing every single day, even if it's 4 hours a day, that's when you get good. I don't care if you read a book about art or look at a YouTube instructional tutorial or look at anything else. If you just sit down and move the pencil across paper for 4 hours every day, trying to create images and light and darkness and shading and structures or figures and faces, 4 hours every day, you do that every day, you will get better. But how many times do you see a portfolio from an artist going like, I want to be a comic book artist, and they have maybe 2 pages that are kind of half done, and he said, well, when did you do this? I did this 3 years ago. Well, I'm telling you, there's nothing I can share with you that's going to make you a better artist because you haven't committed yet to it. And it's a little harsh, but I think people need to know that. Like, if you want to be an artist, you need to draw every day, and your portfolio should be full of pages that you've drawn every day. That's the start of the conversation of how to be a good artist.
Yeah, I can feel the hard work in your words. Like you need to follow your heart, but beyond your heart, you need to be motivated. This is the only way.
Yeah, the heart is
And
the engine that drives you through the hard work, right? And I think if you don't truly love it or have that passion for it, it's really hard to log in the 10,000 hours. The people that have put the 10,000 hours in is because they love art so much that they can't imagine a world where they aren't creating and drawing and bringing images to life, right? So, but I assume that they have the heart because they've come to a convention, they've come to meet you, they've come to talk to you about it. Um, I assume that the passion is there, but then you got to convince yourself to put in the hours, and that's the hard work, and that's where the passion gets truly tested, um, both physically and mentally, because it is hard to sit in a chair for 4 hours, 8 hours, and just physically draw. It takes its toll on the body.
yeah, it's true. Okay, so just wanted to say thank you so much. If nothing happened, we will see you here in Malaga.
Yeah.
I hope you can say something for your Spanish fans that they will see you soon.
Yes.
Um, it will be
I'm.
so cool.
Yeah. I'm super excited. I've been to Spain a couple times or 3 times, but only to Barcelona, and I know that that is a very different part of Spain than Malaga, and so I'm excited to experience something new. And it's been a long time, and I can't wait to interact with the fans.
Yeah, I
So
can
see you guys
promise
again.
you, if you visit not only Malaga but Andalusia or region, you will not go out. I mean, you will come.
Okay, all
You
right,
will.
fair enough.
For I can promise to you, if you travel
Yeah,
along the seven cities like
yeah,
Cadiz, Cordoba, Granada, you should visit each one because they are so different. And I
yeah.
hope this time you stay, but I hope you come back, and because I think that you will love.
I'm definitely looking forward to it. So we'll see you soon. Okay.
Okay, Jim, see you soon, and thank you so much for this interview.
My pleasure. Take care.
Okay.